I was invited to a special meeting at Northern Trust Bank last week. They wanted to remind us that Northern Trust is one of the top 10 financial institutions in the world. At the meeting, they explained that the current financial meltdown it's kind of like being in a hurricane. They told us that Northern Trust will not be affected by the hurricane because they're Northern Trust. But because almost everyone else will be affected, they might be affected. Also, at the meeting, they explained to us that next week, the head of the Federal Reserve will read one of two statements. They said, we wouldn't want to be the head of the Federal Reserve. It's all like something out of an Ayn Rand novel or an Evil and Woe comedy. Alan Greenspan famously said once that if you think you understand what I'm talking about, you probably don't get it. Welcome. Welcome to Conservative Coffee Hour. I'm Stanley Smith. Last Saturday, we talked about gays against groomers, gay marriage, Sodom and Gomorrah, and church and hospitality, and butt plugs. Nobody can say that we don't cover diverse topics. When I mentioned that I had heard that the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was actually the sin of not showing hospitality, someone on the call suggested that I find a new church. Last week, we also talked about how Governor Pritzker is testifying at the Supreme Court about gun control and how the FBI worked to close down Martin Luther King in his time, and now government is still in the business of closing people down. The government is in the compliance business, but we're not supposed to be. We're not supposed to be in working under compliance of rules created to make government more fair. They don't apply to us. This all sounds kind of like semantics, but the seats of power come with restraints to protect us from overreach. But somehow they've applied the rules to us. We're accused of being racist and discriminating, but history shows that it's the federal government who has been consistently guilty of this, and they increasingly continue to be so. The Constitution doesn't call for the government to be the arbiters of what is moral. And in fact, it protects us from this becoming the case. Nobody wants the government to be the arbiters of morality. At Conservative Coffee Hour, we sometimes wonder who the they are. And we've identified they as a small group of elites in government. And what are the they guilty of? They're guilty of coercion, racketeering, and extortion. In the process, we've all been identified as domestic terrorists. Domestic terrorists are not against us, the people. Domestic terrorists are defined by the state as enemies of the government. In Oklahoma City, 9/11, and at the Capitol riots, these were all seen as acts against the government. And it's only afterwards that it gets conflated with the idea of being an act against society at large. So far, they haven't identified the current financial meltdown as an act of terrorism, and I suppose they possibly won't because it is actually more on us, the private sector, for doing our own part of misbehaving and acting with poor judgment. It's a cautionary tale. At Northern Trust, they say that they're having many active conversations with clients, which sounds to me like they're all standing around screaming at each other. We're not doing much screaming here at Conservative Coffee Hour because we've kind of cleaned up our act, and that's because I think we're talking more on ideas that focus where we are and what we can do next. And we do this as we continue to explore topics each Saturday and pursue the work of the General Assembly, establishing that here in Illinois. If you would like to join us at the Conservative Call, it's every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Time on Zoom. I will be happy to include my email in the description of this video so I can send you an invitation. And I look forward to seeing you very, very soon.